YouTube, what's good? This is gonna be a reaction to a video says a video called "Why Flawed Abilities Are More Interesting" when it comes to anime. So we're just gonna hop on that motherfucker, okay? You know, let's do it.
Let me ask you a quick question. At what point in a story are the protagonist's abilities at their most interesting? If you take a moment to really think about it, the vast majority of you will probably come to the same conclusion that it's at the tail end of the series. And I completely understand that viewpoint. By the end of the story, the protagonist has likely reached the pinnacle of their strength, perfecting every—
Okay, I'm just gonna repeat this because I was recording before, but it doesn't matter. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's like the show in general. I don't think it's the most interesting at the end. I think it's the most interesting once you're improving, you know? Because there has to be something to look forward to. I'm not interested as much if you're already goated. You know what I mean? Like Goku. If Goku's at his peak, why would I care to keep watching? On some real shit. But not saying that it's bad to be at your peak, but it's just not as interesting because I have nothing to look forward to. I just want to see how this fight goes. Anyway, let's keep going.
skill they've picked up since the beginning, and often unlocking some kind of god tier endgame power that ends up defining the character in all future power scaling debates. And for the most part, I completely agree with this perspective. There's definitely something satisfying about seeing a protagonist you've grown attached to fully master their abilities. But even so, I've always had a soft spot for a different period in their growth. Right around, say, the 30% mark of the story, when they've unlocked their long-term abilities, but they're still rough around the edges, unpolished, learning. Because to a large degree, I believe there is a kind of beauty in imperfect abilities. One that allows writers to create more engaging scenarios and battles than perfect abilities allow. So what is it that makes these flawed, incomplete powers so interesting? How do
the fact that they have something to get better at. That's what it is.
Writers portray the early stages of a character's growth in a way that's compelling? And what are some standout examples of this being done well? That's what we'll be exploring in today's video. So stick around. You might just learn something important. So why do I enjoy the protagonist's imperfect abilities more than their fully realized endgame version? Well, it all comes down to one thing: flaws. When designing an ability, there's a sort of trifecta of flaws that a writer should consider. Each element adds depth, and together, they shape how the ability interacts with the story. The first of these is the weakness, and is actually the least important of the three. Weaknesses are what counter the ability. It's useful to have a few in mind when crafting powers. Some writers go for hard counters, like an ability that becomes completely useless in the light, while others opt for a more indirect weakness, like situational disadvantages. But overall, this is the most superficial layer. The next trifecta is the limitations of the ability. These refer to the upper bounds of what the ability can actually achieve, the limits of its destructive power, the maximum output the user can reach, or the points where the character can't push it further. It defines the ceiling of their potential, at least for now. And then there's the drawback, which I believe is the most important and interesting piece of this trifecta. Drawbacks are consequences that directly punish the user for misusing or overusing their powers.
Yes.
Think of a character who—
I was gonna say, y'all remember when Deku first started, when he first started getting into his All For One. I don't know, I forgot if that's what he was even called. But I haven't watched that shit in a minute. But when he first started utilizing his power, his hands would fucking break, and his legs and his arms and everything would break. Because he couldn't take it. But then he would do that a second time, and all of a sudden, whoa. He got stronger. Anyway. Also, who else, bro? I feel like that's when it was the most interesting. Also, in Demon Slayer, Tanjiro, when he first cut that boulder in half, that was the peak of everything. You know what I mean? What else? Anyway.
Burns themselves by pushing their fire abilities too far, or someone who suffers painful recoil from pushing their body beyond its limits. These drawbacks ground the power in risk and consequence, and that makes them fascinating. And therein lies the main issue with polished endgame abilities. Writers often completely erase this entire trifecta. As characters grow stronger, abilities tend to lose their limitations. What once had a strict boundary now feels limitless. Counters become irrelevant because the power is so versatile it can adapt to anything. And worst of all, the drawbacks, the essential elements of tension, are dropped altogether. And why is this a problem? Well, because you lose tension. You lose the sense of risk, of vulnerability, of creative problem solving.
So you're not excited for a battle because you know it's going to come out with
protagonist has to
winning.
think, adapt, and sometimes even suffer to make them work. That struggle adds a layer of complexity to the writing, and when it's gone, something vital is lost. And no part of storytelling makes this more obvious than with transformations. Deal. Back to the video. To be honest, I've never really loved transformations as abilities. Most of the time, instead of offering some unique new power or creative twist, they usually serve as a glorified stat boost. The character moves faster, the character hits harder, the character tanks more damage, and that's it. Just look at Ichigo's perfected Hollow Mask as one example. It's just a flat boost to his physical abilities. Sure, his attacks are black now or whatever, whoa, cool, but there's nothing really interesting going on besides him being stronger. Now compare these so-called complete transformations to the ones displayed earlier on in the series, and it becomes clear how much more compelling these early transformations were. One aspect that makes these early transformations so much better is the introduction of the Berserk state, where the character can only tap into their power while enraged or under extreme stress, losing control of themselves.
You know who has that right now? Like now, one of the new ones? Gachiakuta, bro. He is not that strong. Well, he's strong, but he's not like the strongest. But when he's mad, oh, he's unlocked everything he needed. When he about to die, he's goated. I mean, I guess he about to mention Aaron, but I don't know. I was also gonna say, a great power system is always gonna have a flaw. Like Hunter x Hunter. Oh, what's his name? Everybody has a flaw. And you have to work around to figure out how to beat somebody. And I think that's great. Like Kurapika's strong as shit, but only against the spiders. Outside of that, he's just a regular smegular dude. He could still beat you, but way harder. In One Piece, you know, they go through year 1, then 500 episodes later, they explain what the fuck hockey is. And how hockey's been used the whole time. And how weakness matters. The first battle with Lucci was not the same as the second one. And they show you that it's not that you were strong back then. It's that, or that the other person was weaker. It's just that they couldn't unlock their full potential. And I think that's why One Piece is one of the greatest fucking animes ever made.
While doing so. And I have to say, I absolutely love these. Just take a look at Naruto's version 2 cloak. He can only access this form when emotionally overwhelmed, but the power increase is insane. It's destructive, raw, and comes with serious consequences. Unlike the perfected chakra cloak, which has almost no drawbacks, version 2 carries a real sense of urgency. The red cloak is literally formed by his blood boiling, cutting down his lifespan and destroying his cells. So even though we know Naruto gains the power to turn the tide of battle, we're still stressed watching it, wondering how he'll manage the aftermath. Or take Ichigo's earlier version of the Hollow Mask. Zangetsu would only step in when Ichigo was desperate, and even then, there was a constant threat of his inner hollow taking control. Every single time Ichigo was forced to use this form, it represented a failure of his ideals, having to borrow strength from the more primal version of himself, introducing an internal and deeper power struggle. These forms are so great because they introduce a second layer of tension. It's no longer just about winning the fight, it's also about managing the transformation itself. The protagonist is walking a tightrope, balancing risk with power and control. The limitation is that they can only access the form under extreme stress, and the drawback is that when they do, no one around them, not even themselves, is truly safe. But if you want an example of an early series transformation without the inner struggle dynamic, look no further than Kaioken. If you were to ask me what my favorite Dragon Ball transformation was, well, I'd have to go with the most iconic choice and say Super Saiyan. But don't get it twisted, Kaioken is right there behind it. Kaioken is a simple yet effective transformation that perfectly balances risk and reward, allowing the user to tap into increasingly higher multiplications of power at the cost of damaging their body. What I especially love about this transformation is how variable and dynamic it is. Goku can decide how far to push it moment to moment, sometimes dipping into higher multipliers extremely briefly to minimize damage, while generally maintaining a safer range. That element of choice and strategy is what makes it way more engaging than basic transformations that just hand out stat boosts with no real consequences. Now for the real reason I made this video. To rant about how One For All was more interesting in the first 2 seasons than in the entire rest of the show. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Super strength is one of the most overused powers in all of fiction. Superman, Spider-Man, at this point, literally every shonen power system has it bundled in like it's part of a starter kit. But the early version of One For All, that was one of the most unique takes on super strength I had ever seen, and that's all because of its ridiculous drawback. Hirokoshi nailed the raw impact of the ability by making it physically destructive, not just to the environment, but to the user themselves.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
When Deku used One For All early on, his limbs literally shattered. And it's not just that. The wind howled and the air physically bent with every single punch. We as the audience didn't need to be told that One For All was strong. We could see it for ourselves. Remember when All Might literally changed the weather with a single punch? That's how you sell power. But what really sold One For All as special to me was the toll it took, the drawback.
Yes,
seeing Deku burn through his own limbs like they're bullets in a chamber, shattering fingers, breaking arms, using already broken limbs to keep fighting, it's one of the sickest dynamics I've seen come out of a power system. Sure, he inevitably had to evolve past this level of self-destruction, but for me, that broken version of One For All, the version that majorly cost him something, is more interesting than any of the 6 quirks they later slapped onto him. And one of my favorite tropes to come out of this is when a character manages to use their abilities' drawbacks to their advantage. You don't get to see those kinds of scenarios with perfect abilities, like with solo leveling.
And I'm not gonna lie, that's even the reason why I don't like solo leveling as much. It's because there is no drawback. After he beats the first, I guess you could call it the first season because I read it, so I don't really call it a season. But after the fight with the Red Knight, I forgot his name, which is I think that's what he's gonna talk about. But after that fight, that's it. Everything was, he just kept improving. There was literally no beating him. There was stronger opponents, but they still fucking, you know what I mean?
Every single time an opponent tries to poison Jinwoo, nothing fucking happens because he's completely immune and his ability has no drawbacks nor limitations.
Exactly.
I just roll my eyes because of how boring that is. Now compare that to Deku deliberately breaking his own fingers with One For All
just to win a fight.
Break out of Shinso's brainwashing, and you can instantly tell which of these 2 scenarios is more interesting to me.
Facts.
But in my opinion, no one puts their flawed ability to the use better than Yuji Itadori.
Oh shit.
For most of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji is technically powerless. Compared to other sorcerers, he doesn't have a flashy curse technique. What he does have is inhuman super strength and dysfunctional cursed energy control, which again sounds basic, but luckily, Gege knew how to take a flaw and turn it into a feature. Enter Divergent Fist. At first glance, it's not even a real technique, Rather, it's an unfortunate side effect of Yuji being unable to sync his cursed energy with his punches properly. But because of this flaw, Yuji's attacks gain a delayed second impact. It's much weaker than a perfectly timed curse-infused punch, but if used properly, it does manage to catch opponents off guard. And that trade-off is what makes it interesting. Yuji is forced to fight with this handicap, but he does manage to use it to his advantage. Again and again, Divergent Fist is capable of messing with opponents' timing and opening up opportunities. And even after Yuji learns how to properly infuse his strikes, he still falls back on it when the timing is right. Because even a flawed tool can be turned into a deadly weapon if used properly. So what is the point I'm trying to make? Well, it's simple. Flawed abilities are interesting because they force creativity. They demand a certain kind of growth, not just in raw power, but in how a character thinks. And that struggle, that tension, that give and take, that's where some of the most compelling storytelling happens.
Oh my god, yo, the Chainsaw Man movie was fucking amazing, by the way. I just needed to say that.
Abilities are too clean, too perfect, too convenient. They stop being tools for character development and just become bait for flashy animation sequences or Sakuga compilations. But when they're unpredictable, risky, or dangerous to the user, that's when characters rise above their limits, not just by overpowering the enemy, but also by outsmarting their own flaws. So yeah, no one is denying the fact that endgame power-ups are cool. Everyone loves seeing a protagonist at their peak, but I'll always have a soft spot for that messy middle stage, where the protagonist is still figuring it out, where every
100%.
fight feels like a gamble, and when victory really and truly means something. Because it's those moments of hopeful desperation that make a story compelling in the first place. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know what your favorite flawed ability in fiction is in the comment section.
His name is Pint is here. I mean, he's got 37K followers. Comment. Anyway, chat, that was it. I'll see y'all around.